top-notch customer experiences and drive more revenue. Klaviyo powers smarter digital relationships. Visit klaviyo.com/Vox to learn more. That's KLAVIYO.com/Vox.
Scott, we're back. Reddit has filed to go public finally. This will be the first major tech IPO of the year, the first social media IPO since Pinterest in 2019, if you can believe it. The platform's bankers are looking for a valuation of at least $5 billion, not too big. It has 73 million daily active users and one of the most visited websites in the U.S. In an unusual move, Reddit will reportedly offer 75,000 power users the chance to buy shares at the IPO price. I think other companies have done similar things. First off, Reddit has been around since 2005. This will be a test for IPOs in general. Their business is largely advertising. Now probably the most controversial thing is this data licensing agreement. They just announced a $60 million deal with Google last week, which I think people inside who use the company are not happy about. So any thoughts? Talk to me about this IPO.
Well, first off, everyone's sort of waiting for the market to thaw, the IPO market, and it probably is beginning, or the atmosphere is lining up just because of the acceleration in the markets. The markets are reaching new highs, and NVIDIA has totally inspired. Kind of the animal spirits appear to be returning. And there's several IPOs lined up, and everyone's waiting for one to really pop, whether it's going to be Reddit or Shein, which is kind of the biggest fast fashion company in the world. I like Reddit a lot. I actually think this IPO could be a real winner because, the first thing I do is very basic. I type in most traffic sites in America. Number 1 is Google. Number 2 is YouTube. Number 3? Reddit.
Yeah, my kids use it. Like crazy.
And number 4 is Facebook. Number 5, Amazon. Number 6, Pornhub. Number 7, Wikipedia. And number 8, Yahoo.
Yahoo over Twitter.
Isn't that crazy? I'm a shareholder in Yahoo. But my thesis around Yahoo is the same as my thesis around Reddit, and that is, remember those charts I always used to put out 10, 15 years ago saying, newspapers command 7% of people's attention, but they get 18% of the advertising revenue, whereas the internet is 30% of people's attention, but only 9% of money. And over time, the two calibrate, they normalize. They come in line with each other. And so when you look at the most trafficked sites in the world, they're usually, $1+ trillion companies. And so this company's going to go out supposedly at a valuation of $5 billion, and it's the third most trafficked site in the United States.
Yeah, it's a bargain. It's a bargain.
They should be able to figure this out.
They still rely on advertising quite a bit. Like that if you look at the numbers, it's a really heavy, and so they're subject to the vicissitudes of the market. I get it. You're right. This is a much smaller company. Like, I've interviewed its CEO Steve Huffman quite a bit. I like him. He was really first on figuring out content moderation. They of course had a terrible back in around some really heinous sites there on the site. It's always been a little bit of a shaggy dog of a social media site.
But they did this $60 million deal. They have a little bit of that AI spice on their meal. They got $60 million. I think that's going to go up, or they might take the content in-house. This is their risk. They can't be Pinterest and Snap that have kind of gone sideways and always end up being the little engines that couldn't. But if they continue to be one of the most trafficked sites in the world, they can put an AI spin on this at $5 billion. Let me just be transparent. I'm going to try and get stock in this thing. I think this could be either Shein or Reddit are going to set the IPO market on fire.
Shein is a retailer, though, of course, right?
But Shein, it's another one. We'll talk about this another day. But Shein is now the largest fast fashion company in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting.
One or both of these is going to have a big pop because the IPO market has been so thawed that I bet these get priced fairly conservatively.
$5 billion is low. It's very low.
That's nothing.
Yeah,
that's the problem. So if it sticks at $5 billion, it's not going to go on analyst numbers.
Yeah, it doesn't make money as I look. I think they're cash flow positive, I believe. What's interesting here is that 9% of the voting power of Reddit, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, there he is, pops up. He invested at a time when they were struggling a little bit, $60 million in shares, because they were going to go IPO and then they weren't, and then they were sort of owned by Condé Nast, and they were, They went through a lot. This company has gone through a lot of iterations, and person who said to me, some people are just malignant actors and we're going to throw them out. And nobody had ever said that, and they had no resources to do it. And that was a big deal when he said that to me. I was sort of like, the company with the least ability to do anything about it was articulating something that just made perfect sense, right? And this was a company that was so free speechy, you couldn't, I mean, they got in trouble for it very early on. Tell me about Altman. What do you think about Altman?
His investment gets this thing at least another $1 billion in valuation, because it's more of that AI sprinkling. It's more that AI pixie. Everybody thinks Sam Altman, maybe with the exception of Jensen Huang, is the smartest person in the world. And he's an investor and a shareholder here. One of these companies is going to have a triple-digit opening day in the IPO market, and we're going to be off to the races. I think this is a great...
You like it?
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah.
And not only that, Reddit, it's a global brand. People know it. It's a global brand. How many global brands can you pick up for $5 million?
But not just that, it's a youth brand too. My kids, I was surprised. They use two things: YouTube quite a bit, but Reddit just as much. It's a really, and they don't use it for chit-chatting. They use it for videos and consumption, which they don't like. They don't like TikTok. I know it sounds crazy, but they find it too performative, and they think Reddit feels more real. It's an entertainment vehicle for them, which is interesting to me.
So you know it's a really interesting hack that I didn't discover. Type in your search and then add the word Reddit and see what comes up.
Oh, interesting. Well, you know, there's a whole thing on why we're so annoying on Reddit. Do you know that?
Oh, really?
They vote about which one of us is more annoying. I'm sorry.
That's a tough one.
I'm insufferable.
That's not an easy call.
No, but really.
That's a photo finish.
I'm insufferable, but interesting. You are the most annoying. I'm sorry to tell you. But some people love you.
Oh, you've already decided?
I know. I looked at it. I'm looking at Reddit. There's whole sections talking about whether we're annoying or helping.
For those of you who are wondering, if we go 10 minutes without talking about us, tell me about your book, Karen.
No. But let me tell you, I went there and it popped right up. I was looking for book reviews from it.
You heard about our therapy session?
No, people love that. People love this. It is the Scott McCarran Show. But I'm saying it was really interesting. It's just endlessly interesting information. But there's a whole section of whether we're annoying or not. That's really.
Well, the answer is yes.
Yes, we are.
But as long as we're entertaining, that's fine.
That's what I said. I was like, I almost popped in and went, "Hey, girls."
I'm the Ted Cruz of podcast. You don't like me, but you keep voting for me.
Yeah, that's
keep
true.
Listening.
No, whatever. Anyway, you have a lot of fans too. Anyway, let's move on. We like this Reddit.
Watch out. I'm calling it out. Reddit, first trade, way up.
Okay, we'll see. All right, let's bring in our friend, a Pivot. Barbara McQuaid is a former U.S. attorney and the author of Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America, which is one of our favorite topics here on Pivot. Barbara, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Karen. Great to be with you and Scott.
Great. So this book really delves into how disinformation has spread and become weaponized in recent years. You mostly talk about legal issues when you appear and things like that. Talk a little bit about it and how we got here. You write, we are not just living in a post-truth world, we are living in a post-shame world, which, of course, both at the same time. So talk to me a little about how we got here and why this part interested you.
Yeah, so my background is as a federal prosecutor in the national security space. Before I was a U.S. attorney, I was a national security prosecutor. And now I teach national security law at the University of Michigan Law School. And one of the things I have seen is the threat evolve from Al-Qaeda to ISIS to cyber intrusions and now to disinformation. And at one time, this was something that was coming at us from Russia and other hostile foreign adversaries. And now it is a problem coming at us from within the United States, from our own political actors. That's where the name comes from. And the idea of post-truth and in a post-shame world is that it is not the case that we're all a bunch of rubes falling for false claims. It is the case that people are deliberately going along with the con. And that's because there are polarizing figures in politics who have convinced us that there are only two sides to any equation. There is the far right and the far right and the far left. There is, good versus evil. By so demonizing the left and the woke, there are people who are willing to choose tribe over truth. and that is what my book is about.
So you're saying, you're saying democracy dies in the bright light of day. That's the famous Washer, democracy dies in darkness. That's something I have noticed, is that, before it was quite furtive, whether you're talking about national security, whether it was the Chinese, the Russians, or the Iranians, or all these different actors that you have used digital means. Now it's explicit. It's not implicit, or it's not hidden in that regard.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, there's this Brett Baier interview on Fox News just the other day with Donald Trump, where he just goes on and on and on talking about how he won the 2020 election, and every time there's an interjection of facts, he is just relentless and won't stop. And so he is just following sort of the age-old adage of repetition. If you say things enough times and people hear them enough, they will believe them. But I think that it's something more than that. It is that people have chosen their tribes, and they don't care what the truth is. People talk about Donald Trump has been indicted on 91 counts of crimes. They don't care, because they have aligned their fortunes with their team. They have been convinced that there is only this or that. It's something referred to as the either-or fallacy, and they don't want to be convinced otherwise. And so we find ourselves in this polarized world where truth doesn't matter. And if we are going to be a democracy that governs ourselves, we have got to recommit ourselves to truth.
Why is America particularly vulnerable to disinformation? You say that.
I do, and I think it is because of our cherished values of free speech. Don't get me wrong, free speech is incredible and is essential to democracy. It is what protects minority voices and unpopular voices from sharing their views and criticizing those in power. But there is also this idea that any suggestion that we should restrict speech or restrict social media gets labeled censorship. And when we hear censorship, our heckles go up, and we say, no, that's a bad thing, that's a bad thing. But that's what permits content moderation and prevents some of the social media platforms from becoming toxic hellscapes. I think that people forget that all fundamental rights can be limited as long as there's a compelling governmental interest, and the limitation is narrowly tailored to achieve those interests. So, for example, we could regulate content on social media for that which is paid. If you pay on social media, then maybe the social media platforms can reject certain things that are false or lying, or we can require at least disclosure of paid content online without worrying about violating the First Amendment. And so I think sometimes our devotion to the First Amendment blinds us to common sense restrictions that are time, place, or manner restrictions akin to yelling fire in a crowded theater.
Nice to meet you, Barbara. So the level or the magnitude of the problem is a given. It's obvious. It's a threat. I think people perceive it as a threat. I guess the question I would have is, what solutions do you propose? And I'll put forward a thesis that there's always going to be individuals who will take advantage of these porous platforms and are willing to lie and expecting better people to emerge. There will always be people willing to lie and repeat lies. And I don't think shaming is working. We could sue the platforms or try and go after them. My sense is they're too big. Do you think at some point we need to incorporate more into our educational institutions critical thinking, and then to restore that there is a truth? The truth is an actual thing. But let me finish where I started. What solutions do you propose?
So in the book, I do propose some solutions. And Kara, I'm looking forward to reading Burn Book about your take on social media as well. I'm sure you've got some ideas in there.
We're fucked. If you'd like the cliff notes. Go ahead.
Kara has a book coming out? I didn't know.
You know what? I got fans, Scott. Go ahead.
I do propose some solutions, and Scott, I think they have to come from both sides of the equation. I think our government can do some things to restrict social media. Social media is an incredible tool. Despite what Kara says, I think it connects people in wonderful ways. But I think we've been really naive in the way we've let it grow without any sort of regulation whatsoever. It's like growing a baby alligator in your bathtub. It's adorable when it starts, and it's very exciting until it turns into a man-eating predator, which is where we are today. today. And I think we could do some things. One of the things that Frances Haugens, who is the Facebook whistleblower, said during her testimony in Congress is it's not the content, it's the algorithms. And so there are algorithms online that will push people to content that is most likely to generate outrage, because that's what keeps eyeballs on the platform. And so we can regulate algorithms. That would be something we could do that would not run afoul of the First Amendment. We could either prevent algorithms that drive us to that which outrages us, or we could at least require disclosure of algorithms so people know when they are being manipulated for outrage. So that's something we can do. I also think that we see a lot of content on social media that does not play by the same rules as advertising on television and radio. If you listen to an ad on the radio or see something on television, you'll sit here, I'm Joe Biden and I approved of this ad. That does not exist on social media. So you could have Russia. Posing as the red, white, and blue grandmothers of America, posting ad content online without disclosure. So I think there are a number of things we can do with the law to change the way disinformation is allowed to percolate. Proliferate. There's a good word, online.
Right now, as we're talking, the Supreme Court is arguing these two cases, and there's another one coming around the limits of the government to warning, telling people to take certain content down, companies. So talk a little bit about the cases currently there and the one coming, because they're all very important. It's sort of a rethinking of and these are Texas, we just talked about them, Texas and Florida laws. I happen to be on the side of the tech companies here, although I think they're wildly irresponsible and under no liability or anything else. So that's the problem on that side. But I tend to be for the tech companies on this one.
Yeah, and it's important, Kara, to differentiate. You can't be all for companies on one thing and all for states on another. You have to look, elementally at these things, point by point. And on this one, I think the tech companies are right. The idea that states can prevent tech companies from moderating content, again, in the name of censorship. They throw out that word, and it sounds so frightening. But imagine what this would look like if they could not do that. If they cannot have community standards that are enforceable by contract. These are private companies, and so they are not bound by the First Amendment. They have the right to say and not say anything they want.
What's going to happen here? What do you think from listening to what they're saying, the justices?
It's always difficult to predict what might come out in the end, but I have a hard time seeing a majority of these justices ruling in favor of these states and against the tech companies and telling them what they must allow on their platforms. These are private actors. And so I think that, although some of these justices are no friends of the political left or even of these big tech companies, I can't imagine that in light of their views of the First Amendment, that they would allow these states to tell them what to do. In fact, I'd like to think that the only reason that they took up these cases is not because they consider them serious laws.
But they want to knock them down.
Yeah, because, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld this statute in Texas, and so there's a circuit split, and so they really do have to step in here to knock them down.
What about the Biden one? What about the one coming after that? They also took that one.
Yeah, and so this is an interesting one. This is the one where the Biden administration is working with tech companies, and in the light most favorable to the Biden administration, I think they would say, we have to jawbone with tech companies to engage with them and tell them what is false and ask them to take it down. We're not ordering them, we're not demanding, we're trying to work together with them to protect public safety. If we see something that is, a COVID remedy that might be dangerous to public health, or something else that is...
or Al-Qaeda up to its usual tricks or something.
Yeah, there you go. A terrorist organization that is recruiting online. It is helpful to the public for that sharing of information to go on. Now, I could imagine the courts structuring something to ensure that this is an ask and not a demand. And so maybe they put some roadblocks in place to make sure that there is no coercion going on when it comes to government and no repercussions coming on. But I can't imagine, again, that we could live in a world where the government is forbidden from sharing with social media companies
Dangerous information.
things that are harmful to public safety. So I think that this will come out in favor of those sorts of communications. And the most restrictive thing I could imagine is some guardrails there to prevent coercive situations.
Well, you're a U.S. attorney, Barbara. My sense is the fines can't be big enough. They have an army of lawyers. It's just the cost of doing business. Does any of this really get any better until someone does a perp walk?
That's Scott's favorite. He wants to see one in jail.
And do you mean one of the social media companies? Or do you mean...
Yes.
That it was fined $5 million. That was 11 weeks of cash flow, and they keep on trucking.
Well, I want to get back to a point that I think could help us, and that is the point you mentioned earlier about responsibility of the users. And I do think the responsibility of individuals, but also as a society, to educate the public about being critical consumers of social media. We have intended to believe what we read online, believe what we see online. And again, it is a wonderful way to share information at scale. But in Finland, a place where they have suffered from disinformation from Russia for decades, school children are trained in critical reading studies to be able to identify disinformation when they see it, looking for a second source, not reading solely the headline, looking past artificial intelligence and recognizing that there is such a thing as deep fakes on audio and visual and those sorts of things. And I think, Scott, we can't end it at just critical media studies. We also have to look at civics education. And so to understand, how our government works, the three branches of government, checks and balances we have.
What about that perp walk or repealing or amending Section 230? That's a liability exists in some fashion.
So I don't know that we could completely repeal Section 230. I think if we were to repeal Section 230, we would put these social media companies out of business. I think there's just too much volume online for them to do it. But I do think, we could have some amendments to Section 230 for things like algorithms that are manipulating people and pushing content that outrages us. I think we could have liability for false advertising where they've accepted money in exchange for the content that is online. So I think, again, it's this all or nothing thinking, the dumbed down, and perhaps social media has driven us to that sort of this or that all or nothing thinking. But the nuance is in between, and we need our legislators to take this seriously. A lot of times when we have those hearings and we have some of our senators and members of Congress listening to people like Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey testify, you can see them start to glaze over, and they look like those people in the ads for Progressive Insurance. You're becoming your
-1.com.
This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Mike Edmondson. Coming up on The Daily, disappointed by President Biden's support of Israel's ongoing war in Gaza, many primary voters in Michigan wrestle with abandoning their candidate. That's The Daily, coming up at 7:06. Marketplace starts now.
Marketplace is supported by Thomas, a Xometry company. Businesses can find 500,000 U.S.-based industrial suppliers and source millions of industrial products and services at thomasnet.com.
In no particular order: goods of the durable kind, homes of the starter kind, and economics of the political kind. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Buyside from the Wall Street Journal. Buyside's reviews and recommendations help consumers decide how to spend their time and money at WSJ.com/Buyside. And by Progressive Insurance. The Name Your Price tool provides a range of coverage options. Progressive.com. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And by Indiana University's Kelley School of Business, developing tomorrow's business leaders through the nationally ranked Kelley Direct Online MBA. More at iu.edu/online MBA.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Risnell. It is Tuesday, today the 27th of February. Good as always to have you along, everybody. We begin on this Tuesday with today's entry in the Corporate Communications Department working overtime sweepstakes. Macy's in case you haven't heard, is entering a bold new chapter. All caps, by the way, bold new chapter. That's what the company's calling the new strategy it announced on its earnings call this morning, balancing, and I'm quoting here, the art and science of retail. To make that happen, balancing act, Macy's is going to close 150 of its 481 stores over the next 3 years. And Macy's is not, of course, the only department store fighting a dusty and dated image. So Marketplace's Kristen Schwab starts us off today with department stores' role in retail and how it has changed.
When department stores followed urban sprawl into the suburbs after World War II, they became local centers of shopping and socialization.
You get people in the door and you don't get them to leave. You could spend the entire day there.
Michael Lisicki is a historian who's written several books about department stores. He says they sold clothing, furniture, and appliances, and they had restaurants, salons, and photography studios.
And these massive emporiums, as they grew, were able to stock things that you could not buy anywhere. They had a monopoly in a sense, on retail.
Of course, between globalization and online shopping, the monopoly didn't last, and the department store's strength as a place for everything became its weakness. Because Christina Boni, senior vice president at Moody's, says browsing now happens on your browser.
You don't go to the store to do inquiry in the same way you used to do. Today, you have a good idea of what you're looking for.
And if you don't, you likely want a curated selection to help you cut through the infinite choices online. To many shoppers, Macy's old model as a place for everything can be overwhelming.
If you had a magic wand, people would not have department stores the size that they are today.
Macy's doesn't have a magic wand, but it does have a few tricks up its sleeve, like its other stores, including Bloomingdale's, which caters to higher spend customers, and Bluemercury, which sells skincare and cosmetics. David Swartz, senior equity analyst at Morningstar, thinks it will take more than that.
There's really no place for the traditional department store anymore.
He says closing 150 locations will give the company some capital to refocus on its discount store, Macy's Backstage, and smaller concept stores.
I think there's a future for Macy's. It's just not going to be the old Macy's.
The bigger and more iconic the brand, Swartz says, the harder it is to change. I'm Kristen Schwab for Marketplace.
Ticker symbol M, by the way, gets you to the share price for Macy's Incorporated. Traders liked what they heard about the company's bold new chapter. M up better than 3 1/3% today. The major indices mixed. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. The fundamental outline of the American housing market right now, you know. Mortgage rates are high, inventory is low, and prices keep going up. Up to record highs, in point of fact. Home prices in the 20 biggest metro areas in this economy peaked as last year drew to a close. That's according to the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Home Price Index, which came out this morning. Among many other challenges, that kind of market makes it tricky at best for people to get into what's historically been called a starter home. The proverbial foot in the door of the American housing market. The light on frills, light on square footage, but also light on the wallet property. Young families can maybe spend a couple of years in, build up some equity, and then trade up. Starter homes do, of course, still exist, but they look a whole lot different than they used to. Marketplace's Amy Scott and Matt Levin have this bi-coastal glimpse into the past, present, and future of the starter home.
All right, Amy, I went to check out a starter home in San Jose, California, the most expensive starter home market in the country, according to Redfin.
So I'm guessing it costs like $1 million?
Sadly, you are not far off. Here's what one of those starter homes look like.
Vamos. Mira, me gusta la cocina porque
Isaías Castro and his realtor Mina Fernandez are giving me a tour of his 776 square foot house in East San Jose. The Redfin listing calls it a cute as can be starter home for, get this, $839,000. It's a quick tour, 2 beds, 1 bath. But it's got a pretty big backyard, which came in handy when all 4 of Castro's kids were using that one bathroom in the morning.
When I go for the pee-pee, no problem. I go outside like a ranch.
So really, it's 1.5 bathrooms.
You can make your jokes, Amy, but Castro says he loves this house. Castro bought it for around $300,000 more than 20 years ago. Back then, he was a driver for a local medical supply company. Bay Area housing wasn't cheap in the early 2000s, but it was possible for Castro to get his foot in the door. Now he's selling, partly to be closer to 2 of his adult children. Both moved to California's much cheaper Central Valley to find their starter homes.
Sí, intentaron